What we're covering in this recording is the material that will be on the first math quiz next week. What we're going to be dealing with this semester for the next two quizzes and the math test are whole numbers, fractions, and decimals. So a whole number is anything that is not a fraction nor a decimal. It is a number. If you were to count on your fingers and toes, you've got whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Fractions are a portion of a whole number. Decimals, likewise, are a portion of a whole number, but they're represented as multiples of 10, multiples of 100. So fractions are used whenever we need to take into consideration a number that is less than a whole. So fractions can be proper or improper fractions. A whole number would be 1. A fraction would be a half. We can combine whole numbers with fractions to make numbers such as 1 1/2. A proper fraction would be a number like 1 and 1/2. That would be a proper fraction. An improper fraction would be a fraction that's not reduced down to its lowest form, where the whole is represented in the fraction itself. What I mean by that is 3 halves is equal to 1 and 1/2. So they mean the same thing, but 3 halves is an improper fraction as opposed to 1 1/2 being a proper fraction. 3 halves can be further broken down. You divide the numerator 3 by the denominator 2, and what you would have as a result is 1 1/2. A proper fraction, 1 1/2, as opposed to improper fraction being 3 halves. Decimals are also used to represent less than a whole. 1.5 means 5/10. It would be 15/10 basically. So that in a fractional form would be equal to 15/10. Well, if you divide 15 by 10, then what you would wind up with is 1 and 1/2. So they all mean the same thing. It's just that decimals are multiples of 10. If you had 1.6, that would be 1 and 6/10. So they really mean the same thing. They're decimals are just a way of representing fractions that are even numbers, or numbers that are in multiples of tens or 100s or 1000s, depending on how far out you carry the fraction. So calculation of percentage is just a means of representing a number that is maybe representative of something totally different. So a percentage is just a fraction. It's part of a whole, and it's usually represented in decimal form. So your whole is represented by 1. So if you have all of something, that's represented by 1. And how we represent that in decimal form is by the number 1. So 100% of something means 1. So if you have all of your savings, then you have the whole part of it, and that is represented by the 1. If you gain interest, then that would be represented by something greater than 1. If you're in the stock market right now, you're probably losing money, so that would be representative of something lower than 1. So 100% means the whole. The whole is equal to 1. Half, less than a whole, would be divided by 2. It would be the whole divided by 2. So what we would have is, again, 50% or half of something. So if you had an investment, let's say, and it gained 50%, then what you would have at the end of whatever year that you're considering, or the period of time that you're considering, is if you still had your whole, you'd have 1. And if you earned 50% on it, then you would have 1.5. That'd be representative of 150%. So to calculate a percentage, we need to pay attention and understand what it is a question is asking us. So if we have a question that says, what is 10% of something? It's asking basically, what is the fraction of the whole that's represented in the question? So 10% of a whole is a small fraction of the entirety of it. So 10% is equal to 0.1. 0.1 is equal to 1/10. So what is 10% of 250? You would multiply 250 by 0.1. So what you would wind up with is 25. Now it would seem that since 0.1 is equal to 1/10, then what you should be able to do is to just divide our whole number by 10, and that would certainly work if you were working with 10%, but it doesn't work with everything. For example, if we have 12%, 12% is greater than 10%. So whenever we're talking about decimals and we're talking about percentage, the larger the number, the larger the fraction, essentially. So if we have 12% of 250, again, we'd calculate it in the same way. We'd calculate 250 times 0.12 in this case, and that would bring us to 30. But does that give us the same total as what we would have if we divided 250 by 12? And the answer is no. If we divided 250 by 12, what we would get is, divided by 12, is 20.8333. So it's not always a good idea to use division unless you carry the division problem all the way out. What I mean by that is 12 or 0.12 is actually 12/100ths. To calculate a percentage off of 12/100ths, what you would have to do is multiply 250 by 12 and then divide by 100 to get to 30.